Welcome to the news at this hour. On the news, China to recommend issuing all kinds of visa for the first time since 2020. Zelensky says future of Ukraine relies on eastern battlefields. Amnesty condemns growing police misuse of rubber bullets globally. Taiwan says it hopes to return soldier who went to China, and Moscow, Beijing establishing a world of danger. Disorder division, says UK. Stay with me for these and more stories. On coronavirus pandemic, China says it will begin issuing all types of visas to foreigners from Wednesday, lifting cross-border control procedures enforced 3 years ago at the start of COVID-19 pandemic. In early 2020, China stopped giving out visas to foreigners and passports to its people as the disease ravaged the central city of Wuhan. The recommencement of visa services removes the last of the cross-border control measures introduced because of the virus. According to the report, Tom Simpson, Managing Director of China-Britain Business Council, said resuming applications for all types of visas removes another significant barrier in the resumption of normal travel between the UK and China. The council has already seen business travel applications and arrivals begin to increase since January. However, this news should lead to a significant increase in visits, in particular for tourism. On Tuesday, areas in China that needed no visas before the pandemic will return to visa-free entry, the Foreign Ministry said. This will include the southern tourist island of Hainan and cruise ships passing through Shanghai port. Visa-free entry to the southern manufacturing hub of Guangdong for foreigners from Hong Kong and Macau will also resume again. Foreigners holding visas issued before March 28, 2020 that are still within their validity dates would also be able to enter China. Beijing began taking applications for passports from its citizens on January 8th after instantly abandoning its zero-COVID strategy at the end of last year. It also withdrew its long-standing advisory against all foreign travel. Travel agencies Ctrip and Connor, particularly during the Lunar New Year towards the end of January, reported substantial rises in bookings and searches for flights to the resort of Sanya and Hainan. China was the world's largest market for outbound travel before the pandemic, having gone from 4.5 million travelers in 2000 to 150 million in 2018, according to the United Nations World Tourism Organizations. Chinese are also the world's biggest spenders when on holiday, accounting to $277 billion or 16% of the world's total spending that same year. Talking Russia-Ukraine war, Ukraine's future relies on the result of the battle raging around Bakhmut and other major cities and towns in the east of the country, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has said. He said it in a video address late on Monday that Ukraine's future depended on destroying Russian forces raiding Bakhmut and other war-torn areas in the country's eastern Donetsk region. Russia has said that taking Bakhmut opens a route to taking control of the whole Donetsk region, a central war target for Moscow. After weeks of grinding and bloody battles, the Ukrainian military says it has not withdrawn from Bakhmut and is determined on staying to fight in order to inflict severe losses on the Russian assault force, which is said to have thrown a huge number of soldiers into the fight without regards for casualties. Russian forces led by the Wagner Mercenary Army have captured Bakhmut's east but have so far failed to enclose the city in spite of making announcements over recent weeks that a Ukrainian defeat was imminent. NATO also cautioned last week that Bakhmut could fall within a matter of days. Ukraine's forces in continuing to fight have depleted and worn down Russian forces in Bakhmut, which has also diverted Russia's focus and its firepower from launching a planned counterattack in the spring, Ukrainian officials say. A Ukrainian counterattack to relieve Bakhmut is progressively anticipated. Several Ukrainian brigades were amassed between the cities of Sloviansk and Konstantinivka for the purpose, according to Russian reports. However, so far, the mud that is typical for this time of year as winter snow melts in Ukraine has not permitted for quick advances of paved roads. Ukrainian soldiers deployed near Crimea, north of Bakhmut, said on Monday they were resisting increased Russian attacks. Police misuse of rubber bullets and other less deadly weapons against peaceful protesters has killed dozens of people and injured thousands in over 30 countries over the past 5 years, Amnesty International has said. In a fresh report published on Tuesday, Amnesty International researcher on military security and policing issues. Free trade treaty was required to control the trade in policing equipment, including kinetic impact projectiles, KIPs, such as rubber-coated metal bullets, and to help protect the right to protest. Police misuse of such weapons, in addition to causing deaths, has resulted in an alarming increase in eye injuries, said the report, publishing jointly with the Omega Research Foundation, entitled "My Eye Exploded." These injuries include eyeball ruptures, retinal detachments, and the complete loss of sight, as well as bone and skull fractures, brain injuries, the rupture of internal organs, and hemorrhaging, punctured hearts and lungs from broken ribs, damage to genitalia, and psychological trauma. In Chile, for example, an evaluation by the country's National Institute for Human Rights found actions during anti-government protests in 2019 resulted in more than 440 eye injuries, with over 30 cases of eye loss. Amnesty said the use of rubber bullets to suppress peaceful protests has also become commonplace in the United States. In Palestine, Amnesty said Israeli forces have continued to habitually use rubber-coated metal bullets against Palestinians, despite Israel's Supreme Court recommending in 2000 that such weapons were lethal and should not be used for policing demonstrations. A recent report by the United Nations Human Rights Council documented 438 injuries among Palestinians due to Israel's use of rubber-coated metal bullets during the Great March of Return protests of 2018. Amnesty said it had also documented the use of tear gas grenades being targeted and fired right at individuals or crowds in Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, France, Gaza, Guinea, Hong Kong, Iran, Iraq, Peru, Sudan, Tunisia, and Venezuela. Amnesty and the Omega Research Foundation said that human rights-based trade curbs needed to be introduced on the supply of such weaponry as part of the United Nations-backed agreement. Taiwan's defense minister has said the self-ruled territory's government is probing the disappearance of a soldier serving on an offshore island who has been found in China. Speaking at Parliament, Chiu Ko-cheng said, and I quote, "We certainly hope to bring him back home. So how will we get him back? There are alternative channels we are pursuing." He did not elaborate on those channels. The minister refuted what he called rumors that the soldier had fled from abusive treatment by the military. The soldier serving on Erdun Island, which is part of the Kinmen Islands close to the Chinese coast, went missing last week and was found on Monday. China's Taiwan Affairs Office has not commented. Beijing, which claims Taiwan as its own territory, has stoked up military and political pressure over the past 3 years to try and get Taiwan to accept Chinese sovereignty. Taiwan's government rejects Beijing's claims and says it is for the people of Taiwan to determine their future. During the height of the Cold War, defectors from both sides will sometimes swim between China and Kinmen, which at low tide can be less than 2 kilometers, that's 1.6 miles, from Chinese-controlled territory. It was from there that Justin Lee, who went on to become the chief economist of the World Bank in 2008, swam across to defect to China in 1978. Taiwan has controlled Kinmen as well as the Matsu Islands further up the Chinese coast since the Nationalist Republic of China government fled to Taiwan in 1949 after losing the civil war with the communists who established the People's Republic. Now, the United Kingdom views China as representing an epoch-defining challenge to the world order and sees the UK and Europe's security tied to Russia's unsuccessful prosecution of its war on Ukraine. An update to the UK's strategic foreign and defense policy blueprint states. The UK highlights the challenges posed by China and its deepening partnership with Russia in a refresh to the Integrated Review IR policy paper, as well as Moscow's rising cooperation with Iran. The 63-page report unveiled on Monday strengthens the UK's language and positioning towards Beijing and Moscow and emphasizes the systematic and existential threat that both countries pose to the UK, Europe, and the wider rules-based world order. According to a report, China responded to the UK report on Tuesday with warnings that London's continuous hype of China as a threat will have negative consequences for Turkey's security. The newest review notes that the collective security of the UK and Europe is now bound up with the outcome of Moscow's war on Ukraine and denying Russia any strategic benefit from its invasion. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak wrote in the foreword to the review, Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, weaponization of energy and food supplies, and irresponsible nuclear rhetoric, combined with China's more aggressive stance in the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait, are threatening to create a world defined by danger, disorder, and division. Sunak said that the pace of the geopolitical change and the extent of its effects on the UK and our people could not have been foreseen even as the recently 2021 when the last review was published. The review of 2.3 billion pounds, that's 2.8 billion US dollars in military and humanitarian support to Kyiv, as well as hundreds of aimed sanctions in coordination with allies, had already weakened the Russian war machine and set in motion international justice for Moscow's horrific war crimes. On more stories, North Korea launches 2 missiles second test in 3 days. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff, JCS, said North Korea has launched 2 short-range ballistic missiles into waters of its show of might this week as South Korea and the United States conduct their largest military drills in years. The missiles were fired in a window of about 10 minutes from 7:41 a.m. local time on Tuesday morning. Our military has strengthened surveillance and vigilance in preparation for additional launches while maintaining a full enthusiasm posture through close cooperation between South Korea and the United States, the JCS statement said. Fumio Kishida, Japanese Prime Minister, said his country was collecting information on the missile. Pyongyang's newest test is the second in 3 days and comes as the US and South Korea hold the Freedom Shield large-scale military exercise until March 23rd. It is the first time they have held such exercises, which North Korea sees as a rehearsal for invasion since 2018. South Korea on Sunday evening said it had detected the submarine launch, and North Korea said the following day that it had tested that it would call 2 submarine-launched strategic cruise missiles. Leader Kim Jong-un earlier this month ordered the military to increase drills to deter and respond to a real war if needed. North Korea test-fired over 70 missiles in 2022, including intercontinental ballistic missiles with the potential range to reach the U.S. mainland and short-range nuclear-capable missiles that could aim South Korea. The U.S. and South Korea have said the Freedom Shield exercises focus on the changing security environment, redoubled aggression, and will involve wartime procedures to repel potential North Korean attacks and conduct a stabilization campaign in the north. The allies have stressed that the drills are a defensive one based on a combined operational plan. Analysts have said North Korea was possibly excuse to carry out more missile launches and perhaps even a nuclear test. Again on Russia-Ukraine war, Biden prolongs humanitarian status for Ukrainians who fled war. The administration of United States President Joe Biden will extend the 1-year authorization granted to thousands of Ukrainians living in the country, permitting them status and stay longer just as their paperwork was about to expire. The news comes shortly after 1-year anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which took millions of refugees to the Department of Homeland Security said about 25,000 Ukrainians through the southern border with Mexico can lengthen their stay past the 1 year they were initially granted. Head of Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service, Krish Omara Vijnaraja, said in a statement, for this earliest arrived group of Ukrainians, the continued legal right to live, work and access resettlement assistance in the U.S. is absolutely crucial to their well-being. Over 118,000 Ukrainians have come to the U.S. through a program known as humanitarian parole, which permits people fleeing desperate circumstances where they can apply to more permanent immigration pathways of harm's way. Those authorizations last for 2 years, but almost 25,000 people who entered the U.S. through Mexico in 2022 were given only 1 year permits. The extension will allow them to continue accessing services such as healthcare and food assistance and diminish concerns about their legal status in the country. Humanitarian parole has been deployed to bring groups of people from countries like Ukraine and Afghanistan to the U.S. in recent years. However, many Afghans who were paroled into the U.S. following the collapse of the U.S.-backed government in Afghanistan in August 20 and lose their work authorization if a solution is not found before they pass their 2-year anniversary in the U.S. Advocate bill has not been passed yet. Some have accused the U.S. government of a racist double standard in how it administers the humanitarian paroles at a slow pace and mainly rejecting those it has processed. With Russia's war in Ukraine ongoing, a United States until hostilities subside. In Africa, a state of disaster declared in Malawi after cyclone's deadly return. On Monday, Malawi's president declared a state of disaster in many southern districts. Said President Lazarus Chakwera has noted with grave concern the devastation that Cyclone Freddy is currently bringing to most districts and declared a state of disaster in the southern region. The presidency said in a statement after the storm left a trail of destruction and killed over 60 people in the southern African country. Government is already responding to the disaster while appealing for international relief help for the affected families, it said. Over 60 bodies were found during the day in southern Malawi, where heavy downpours stoked flooding. According to the Red Cross, more people are still missing. Blantyre City was badly affected, with regional police spokeswoman Beatrice Mikuwa saying were recovered in the ship town of Chilobwe, which has been hit the most, with dozens of houses were washed away. Freddy, on track to become one of the longest lasting storms on record, barreled through southern Africa at the weekend for the second time within weeks, making a comeback after a first hit in late February. I'll be back with more stories in Nigeria. Stay with me. It's Zuma Nigeria, and we begin with Central Bank of Nigeria succumbs to pressure, says 200 naira, 500 naira, 1,000 tender until December 31st, 2023. Issa Abdulmumin, CBN spokesperson who announced the development in a statement, stressed that the Apex Bank has ordered commercial banks to the deposit of all Naira notes. The statement reads, in a compliance with the established tradition of obedience to court orders and sustenance of the rule of law principle that characterized the government of President Muhammadu Buhari and by extension the operations of the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, as a regulator, deposit money banks operating in Nigeria have been directed to comply with the Supreme Court rule that the all 200 naira, 500 naira and 1,000 concepts are directed to conform. Accord issue a 7-day ultimatum to the federal government to tackle the present fuel and naira on the outcome of a meeting convened by the Central Working Committee of the Congress. And finally, on the news, FAAN closes Lagos Airport runway for repair. Just 4 months after the Federal Airports Authority extensive repairs, the authority also has shut down the 18-hour international runway for the same reason. However, assured that flight operations will not be affected by the closure of the international runway. According to it, the taxiway B18L of the domestic runway will be used for all flight operations within the period. When contacted, the general manager, Mr. Faithful Hope Ivase Corporate Communication Fund, did not respond to calls made to her mobile line. But the top management staff in the agency confirmed the development to our correspondent on phone. It was also learned that the Nigerian Airspace Management Agency, NAMA, informed them of the development. Recall that domestic runway of the Lagos airport was shut in July 2022, and issuing all kinds of visa for the first time since 2020. Zelensky says future of Ukraine relies on eastern battlefields. Amnesty condemns growing police misuse of rubber bullets globally. Taiwan says it hopes to return. Thanks for watching. I remain Lois Strike. Enjoy the rest of your day.